I call the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Mr Chairman, I just want to pick up on some of the process points that Mr Chevelle's dealt with. And I've got to say to the Minister, I wasn't here for his explanation as to why we don't have an SOP, but I did have a short conversation with him. And we're here in a committee stage on an extraordinary piece of legislation, and we have no government SOP. And I just say to the Minister, that's not good enough. That goes beyond just-in-time management. The people of Canterbury want this thing to work. But for it to work, we've got to have a basic process. Yesterday in the Select Committee, we were denied the right, extraordinarily so, to have officials in an advisory capacity to us. Now, what people who are listening need to understand, because I suspect, as Mr Brownlee, as I've said before, people want us to get on with it. But they also want us, as I've said before, get it right first time and not be back in here in a couple of months or 6 months or wherever saying, hang on, we've got to fix things. People told us there were things to fix, but we didn't do it. They want to get it right first time. Why you need officials in a select committee, of course, is because we don't have a monopoly on all knowledge. And the submitters were testing arguments out and making suggestions, and it would have been helpful and strategically smart for all sides as a health check for getting this right had we had officials present. So we didn't have officials present, and then we had 4 hours and 40 minutes of a select committee process where the public, and not even the public, and I agree that it was rightly targeted to key stakeholders. We don't expect, as I think somebody said, that there should have been weeks of a select committee process. We would have been happy, I think, with an extra 24 hours. We would have been happy if the Minister had signalled on the Friday, submitters, here's the list, you've got the weekend to come up with robust submissions. Submitters had less than 24 hours notice. They did an extraordinary job, and I do pay tribute to Chris Arkenveld for his chairing. I think he did a wonderful impression of Henry Kissinger in trying to diplomatically knit the show together, and I accept that there is some robust emotion around this that some people characterise as politics. Others of us would characterise it as doing our job. So we had 4 hours and 40 minutes for people to submit, and as I've said before, even the Legislative Advisory Council told us, I think it was Dr Warren Young and Mr George Tanner, who, when asked, when did you receive the bill, the first time they'd seen it was at 4 o'clock or thereabouts when it was put on the website. Now, why would we want a little extra scrutiny? Well, we would want a little extra scrutiny so that we can ensure, as I keep saying, that we get this right. There's no politics in that. I would have thought as Minister, if I was Minister sitting in the chair, I would first recognise that I don't have a monopoly on all knowledge, and I would want a reasonable amount of advice from others, even if it was for a political alibi, to say I listened. But even that hasn't been engaged with. But I would want advice to ensure that I could put in front of this Parliament a piece of legislation which would give confidence to the people of Canterbury that we're going to get it right first time. And here we are now at 5 to 11. We rise for lunch at 1 o'clock. We come back for question time, which I presume will go from sort of 2 till 3:30. And then we've got to vote on this. And then we've got to have a third reading, which has to be concluded by 6. And we don't have sitting here an SOP. Now, you might ask, where are our amendments? Well, our amendments are sorted, but we can't put those forward until we know exactly what the government... We've got an indication, and I do say, thank you to Mr Brownlee, we asked him for it last night. It arrived in a short time ago, a list of what he agrees and disagrees with in respect of the submitters. But before you can actually deal to this in a proper and professional way, you need an SOP. And I just say to Mr Brownlee, this is not sort of parliamentary technicalities. Mr Brownlee is right. An SOP, for those who don't know outside this place, is the guts of the government legislation, the government amendments to the legislation. What Mr Brownlee agrees with and will pass, and what he disagrees with and will vote against. And we don't even have that. And I say to Mr Brownlee that it goes beyond just-in-time management. How on earth? Normally Mr Brownlee drops an SOP 2 or 3 minutes before we're about to debate it to ensure that the opposition has virtually no time to see it. But we're now in sort of legislative limbo because Mr Brownlee hasn't done his job. And I don't say that out of any malice or spite. I say to Mr Brownlee, your job is like all our jobs in this place to get this legislation right. And we haven't even got to the committee stage, we're in the committee stage and we do not have an SOP, we do not have, Mr Brownlee, through you, Mr Chair, the Minister's intentions, Mr Chair.
I call the Honourable Minister.
The Minister's intentions as to what he proposes, what the plan is, what the detail around the structure of SERA will be, and his formal response to submitters, not just us. We had input through letters to Mr Brownlee, but his response to formal submitters. And I say this is going to fill people full of a bit of fear, because if this is how we're going to march on through this process, where submitters were not allowed to have their say or given any notice, they were given 4 hours and 40 minutes, where the committee was prevented from asking technical questions and receiving technical advice because officials were not available to us in advisory capacity and we could not engage with them as advisors. And then we come to this. Well, I say to Mr Brownlee, the Minister owes this House a detailed explanation. If it's good enough for submitters to have less than 24 hours to put submissions together, councillors, the Legislative Advisory Committee, the Law Society, who had less than 24 hours to put a very diligent submission together, I would have thought, with all the government's resources and departments at their disposal, working overnight to Mr Brownlee's timetable, that he could have turned up at the start of this committee stage with his plan, with his legislative amendments. Because it is impossible for this House to respond to legislative amendments that we do not have before us. The Greens, I pay tribute to Mr Graham, have set out their proposals and we see them, and I believe we've shared many of ours with nods with the Green member, but we cannot respond until we have the government SOP. Now, I don't know whether this is a portent of things to come. I make the offer to Mr Brownlee, as I've consistently made, that we want to enable this legislation to work. And I say to Mr Brownlee, it will go through today, with or without our support. We reserve that right till we actually see his SOPs. But it will go through. He's told us it has the numbers. And regardless of our fears and thoughts on the issue, once it does go through, Labor members will work diligently to ensure that, or to try and ensure that it works, even with the reservations we do have, even with the extreme process. And I say again to Mr Brownlee, it's not good enough to confuse consultation with delay. One does not impede the other. 24 hours, given that the state of emergency is extended till the 16th of April, would not have altered the position or delayed the position for Cantabrians one iota. What it would have done is allowed more expertise to gather their thoughts and provide assistance to the government, as we have tried to do. And now we sit here in legislative limbo as the hours tick away till lunch and we don't have a government SOP. Now, I don't know whether the government's ground to a halt overnight. I don't know whether it's a level of incompetence. I don't know whether it's a level of fatigue. It could be all of the above. But we are willing to cooperate even at this late stage with the government. Mr Brownlee knows the amendments that we wish to make. He's had the letters for a week, and we're still, even at this late stage, willing to cooperate, and I make that genuine offer to him. But I would say to him that if this is a deliberate process to try and shut us down, or if this is incompetence, or if this is mismanagement, he owes the people of Canterbury to get on his feet and explain in detail where we are on this. And I reiterate one other point. Mr Brownlee can stand and say that any member that raises a criticism is being political. Well, I say to hell with that. I say this. I will stand like Ms Dalzell and Ms Dyson and Mr Burns and others beside our constituents and raise concerns and raise ideas till I drop. And if others want to characterise that either in the media or in this place as being political, well, so be it. I will sleep at night with my conscience clear, because our duty on this side is to assist. And I say this, normally in the process, when you're upset about something in Parliament, you fire a press statement off and have a go. Our modus operandi has been to speak to Mr Brownlee privately, to then write to him if there's no action, and then if we are deeply concerned about it, to raise those issues publicly. We have not engaged in piles of parliamentary questions or endless media statements, and we have only entered the public arena when we are deeply concerned that no action is occurring. We have acted differently. In fact, we have been criticised, I know Ms Dalzell and others have, that we haven't put the boot in from people who are deeply concerned. That we haven't put the boot in. So I say to Mr Brownlee, you owe us an explanation.
I call Dr Kennedy.